national lab in 2005. I was doing a co-op internship for 6 months, and they were doing this big reorg at the time. And so I went into this meeting after a month or so for this big reorg. And the director of the computing was all excited about all this new stuff they were going to be doing. You know, it's government, it's a big deal. And he was talking about this new style of leadership that they were going to have at the lab, and it was only 50 years old. And I started laughing at this point. My colleagues, unfortunately, had sat in the front row, so I was in the front row laughing at the director of the department. And I thought, well, you know, that was kind of a bad move. But I figured, well, the guy doesn't know who I am. I'm just this co-op person, so it doesn't matter. A week later, I got this invitation into his office to talk with him. I was like, oh, this is not good. And so I went in and talked with him. I had no idea what he wanted to say to me, but he said, well, why were you laughing? I don't understand. I said, well, you said that your new style of leadership was 50 years old. And he's like, well, yeah, it's great. And I said, well, you know, I kind of just finished this leadership training program, and we've got all this new information and new data out there, and there are all kinds of better things you can be doing. And so he asked me to show it to him. So to his credit, he was, you know, a leader that was willing to listen, and I brought him this big, huge binder that I had received from this training program, and that was a good experience for me to see that, you know, leaders do listen. And government can innovate, but it's difficult to do, and it's slow going. So I have been thinking a lot about this before coming to this talk, and well, the end of the story is that I left the lab because it was not a very exciting, innovative place at the time to me. I wanted to do startup, so I did the startup thing for a while, and .coms, Silicon Valley, San Francisco, all that, and learned about innovation from that angle. But you know, they really were doing a lot of exciting technical innovation at the lab, and they still do, but it's not the same as in the startup culture, and we're starting to see some shifts, and so these are some of the tools and techniques for doing that. You know, I started looking at definitions of innovation, and they were all kind of boring. Coming up with new things. Great, thanks. So I put together some of the keywords that I think really comprise innovation, especially in the startup culture. These are things that you see in the people and the culture there that must be there in order to innovate. Obstacles, we've seen a lot of that in the talks today so far. None of us are unfamiliar with these obstacles, but you know, the lessons learned are that if you can lead through them, if you can move beyond them and create the right kind of environment, then you will have less of these obstacles. So some of the ways to do that, the startup culture, opportunity, challenge, freedom to explore. If you look at the example of Google and you see how they've grown from being a startup, you know, just a few people at Stanford, worked in a house, you know, moving their way up, they created an environment that was very innovative, very creative, a lot of fun, healthy, encouraging, and they allowed their employees to experiment and adapt, and so that it wasn't as rigorously controlled, and that's one of the keys to their success. And we can do that in government. And Google's still doing it, and they're getting bigger, and it's still a great example. So how to do it from the inside out, you can see examples of the White House. They've got their Open Government Initiative. We have Data.gov now. Directives, they've done it through different departments, agencies. And then, of course, one of the exciting things we saw yesterday in the Apps for Healthy Kids session, if anyone was in there, they have Challenge.gov and all of these different ways that you can get people innovating without having to go through this procurement process. Nish Chopra spoke a little bit about that earlier too, being one of the big roadblocks in government. So these challenges have been a big help, as many of you know, I'm sure. And then some of the other things they're doing, like San Francisco has their apps, and some of the other cities, Portland. And then we've got from the outside in. So things like Open Congress, Fix My Street. I'm very excited about the Open Mesh project. That's relatively new. They're taking mesh networks and using that as a way to get around when people try to shut off the internet, so that there will always be somewhere to go. And that's very important. Many of you know about some of the other resources. I want to have a hat tip to GovFresh. Luke Fretwell was very helpful in helping me frame this session, and all these other great organizations like President, O'Reilly, Crisis Camps, Transparency Camps. These are all really amazing people working on the outside of government. You saw Code for America. What would Yoda say? Well, he would say be patient for one thing, but also we need to work across government, within government, through government. A lot of that is difficult to do. You have to get permission to even talk to other organizations sometimes, and that's not easy. Collaborate cross-sector. I'm working to try and encourage more of that, remove some of these roadblocks, and they're hoping to get a USA API out soon so that people can actually just innovate from software and not have to wait for this huge procurement process and spend all this money that Jennifer was alluding to. And then the re-educating of the government employees and staff, that's really key, I think, particularly for some of the old guard, but as she mentioned, the national stat that I've heard is that 70% of the government workers nationally will be retiring over, I think, the next 10 years or so. So we have a real opportunity here to get some people in there who are technology native, who have social media expertise and experience. Over long haul. What's at stake? Well, for some reason, Jennifer and I always end up having the same slide. Last time it was a different one. This time we used the same San Ramon example, but there's a real risk, I feel, to not innovate. We have all of these incredible tools now, and if we don't innovate, we're losing lives that we could save. We have the tools to save people. So something simple like this app to do CPR, they have this great video, and it's really moving. My dad died 2 months ago. He had a heart attack, and if they'd had an app like this, it's possible he'd still be alive. So, not trying to end on a low note, but I just want to emphasize the severity of this. It is really, really important that we push across the barriers and move beyond the bureaucracy and work together and find new ways to lead through and find new people to get involved. And I think that's really the way to do it.